In part 1, I realized something about the way I keep my trips. My photos are already in iOS Photos, but I still make a separate note for the itinerary and expenses. So I built the first version of the app I wanted to use. The goal is not to replace iOS Photos or build a big travel planner. I just want to test one simple thing. Can I recover a past trip from my photos, then keep the small details I normally write in notes in the same place? Hey guys, I'm Chandler. On this channel, I build small apps around real problems in my life. This is part 2 of the trip record app I mentioned in the last video. And before I show you the first version, I should probably give it a name. The last two apps I made were Moody and Homey. This time, it's travel related, so I simply called it Travii. The idea is still very small. It starts with the photos I already have, then gives me one place to keep the parts of the trip that photos alone cannot capture. Before I show it, there's one important rule. My original photos still stay in Apple Photos. Travii does not copy or upload them to a server. Everything in this first version stays local on my iPhone. For this first version, I wanted Travii to do 4 things. First, start from my photos. Second, turn them into a journey I can review. Third, let me add the details that photos do not know. Fourth, keep the finished trip together so I can come back to it later. To test this, I'm using one of my trips to Penang. First goal, scan. Travii scans my existing photos to find possible past trips. When I first open Travii, I tap Setup Travii. That brings me to the home and scan page where the photo scanning happens. Before scanning, I can set my home location. Any photos taken within 100 kilometers of home will not be included in the suggested trips. That helps remove the everyday photos and focus on the photos that might actually be from a trip. Then I can start the scan. Travii looks at the date and location metadata already attached to my photos and groups photos that seem to belong to the same trip. If I only want to recover a trip from a specific time, I can also enter the date range instead of scanning everything. After the scan, the suggested trips appear here in the Memories tab. Second goal, review. After the scan, the suggested trips appear here in the Memories tab. Let's take this recent Malaysia trip as an example. When I tap it, Travii brings me to this review trip page before saving anything. Here, I can quickly check what it found. The date range, number of days, how many places it detected from photo locations, the number of photos, and a rough journey of those places. This tab is important because the suggested trip is not automatically a finished record. I can look through it first and decide whether it's actually one trip I want to keep. Once it looks right, I tap Save Trip. It becomes a journey that I can come back to later. On the trip page, I can see the days, places, and total photos from that trip. I can also open each place card and look through the photos taken there. Third goal, refine. Once the trip is saved, I can edit the journey to make it reflect what actually happened. I tap the edit button in the top right corner to enter edit mode. On 20th May, Travii found 3 different place cards called Georgetown. It's enough to show the general area I was in, but it's only at city level, so it doesn't tell me the actual places I visited. So I can open each card and rename it manually. For example, this first stop was Ali Nasi Lemak, and the second one was the Eyes and Honey. Between the cards, there's also a plus button where I can add details that the photos do not know, such as a stop or the transport between 2 places. The goal is not for Travii to guess every detail perfectly. It gives me the rough trip from my photos first, then lets me quickly turn it into something I will actually understand later. Fourth goal, expenses. The final goal is to bring the expenses from my trip notes into the journey too. For this Penang trip, I can add what I spent along the way. Simply switch to the expenses tab, then tap the plus icon to start recording. I can see a total for that day and another total for the whole trip. So instead of having the photos in one app and the practical details in notes, I can reopen one trip and see both sides of the memory together. Right now, it is intentionally simple. No categories, bill splitting, or other currencies yet. Just Malaysian ringgit for this first version. This is still only the first version. Right now, expenses are Malaysian ringgit only and manual time entry is not ready yet. So it does not fully replace the trip notes I usually created. The photo locations are useful for finding the general city or area, but they do not always tell me the exact place I visited. That's why I can rename and refine them myself. And sometimes a longer trip can still be suggested as more than one trip, so I still need to review and correct the journey myself. But for me, that's okay for now. The point of this version is to see whether this one basic loop is actually useful before I keep adding more things. So that's the first version of Travii. It starts from the photos I already have, gives me a journey I can review, then lets me add the small details and expenses that I normally keep separately. Now I need to use it on more real trips and see what actually feels slow, unclear, or missing. That's what part 3 will be about. If you keep any kind of record after traveling, what do you usually write down? Places? Spending? Schedule? Or something else? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to follow the build, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next one. Peace.